Hello, welcome again to Chile Talk. I'm Neil Davidson. I'm with Pete Leihy. Hi, Pete.
Hello, welcome everyone to the second part of our Election Eve special on the 18th of December, 2021.
That's the year. I would just like to, kick off here by just reminding our viewers, how high feelings are running. Okay. I was talking to somebody the other day who assured me that José Antonio Cast, the right-wing candidate, had sent an inquiry to universities asking them to report to him who their left-wing professors were. Okay. Now I said, this sounds really unlikely, and this person said, I've had this from, not somebody who reads the news, but I've heard this from 7 different people, that Cast has done this. He's asked for a list. He's preparing the blacklist. It's going to be like Pinochet. Okay, this was their word. It's like Pinochet all over again. And other people, young people I've spoken to, have said, a lot of them are going to leave. If Cast wins, a lot of them are going to emigrate. They seem, in practice, how the hell are they going to emigrate? These are people who haven't got jobs. They're at university. This is the way they feel. And anyway, this story about Cast asking for a list of left-wing staff at universities, I tried to find out what the source of it was. There doesn't seem to be any such request. What did happen was that 2 deputies in the Chilean Congress called Harry Jurgensen and Cristóbal Urruticoechea, the first one ex-Renovación Nacional, National Renewal, a kind of fairly right-wing party, now independent. The second one, a deputy for the Republican Party, which of course is Cast's own party, put in an official request to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance, asking about public money that had gone to institutions and programs dealing with gender identity, also public money spent on basically sex change operations, also public money spent on Transfest, a Chilean festival, transgender, transsexual festival, and another organization called Organizando something, I've forgotten the name. Anyway, sorry, it's called Organizando Transdiversidades, organizing trans diversities. So obviously that's very clear what kind of organization it is. So these deputies had made a fairly, I'd have thought, standard request about how much public money was being spent on these matters. Obviously, no doubt, with the idea of using it for political purposes and saying that it was too much and so on. But it doesn't seem a very... Anyway, this led to a huge uproar. One university, USACH, University of Santiago de Chile, this somehow led apparently to the universities being asked what courses and so on they taught. And one university, all the universities, the state universities, refused to hand over this information, which actually must be public information anyway. One university provided it and also gave the names of staff and students on these courses, apparently, which wasn't required, at least certainly the students. And the students are now on indefinite strike, the University of Santiago de Chile, on indefinite strike until the rector, who's called Juan Manuel Solesi, resigns. So, and clearly the idea has taken hold that, this is the beginning of a new fascism, and if Cast wins, left-wing professors, the secret police are going to come around in the middle of the night and arrest all left-wing professors at universities. So that's just an indication of A, how high feelings are running, and B, how little people actually bother to check up on things they're told. So sorry, Pete, that was a very long monologue on my part.
Well, it is very interesting, the siloed opinions that are floating around on the internet, and on Twitter. It's always very interesting anywhere in the world, but in Chile it does seem to be fairly extreme, and often these movements and actions form around all kinds of disinformation. It's very interesting. But with the election coming tomorrow, what we seem to be increasingly interested in with such a close election is in the average person who's going to vote.
Well, right, because one can get the impression from this stuff that, in fact, everybody's very angry, and like everybody's so entrenched in their positions that they can't be bothered to like spend 30 seconds on Google actually finding out the true facts. And probably nobody actually bothers to find out the true facts, but most people are not that upset, right? We're talking now about the median voter who's not invested in either, you know, anything to do with gender or transgender stuff, probably couldn't care less about it. And who is this person, in fact?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, there's a concept that's called the median voter theorem. It's not actually a theorem. It's not a watertight law, but the concept is that all the issues in play in a reasonably competently run runoff election form into two offers, one on the right of the median voter and one on the left of the median voter. And these tend towards balancing out the median voter theorem. And who the median voter...
Hence the strange frequency with which the electorate is split right down the middle, as in George Bush Jr.'s second election, as in Trump versus Clinton. And now apparently in the Chilean, as far as we know, in the Chilean polls. Yes, and obviously without a US-style election college system where the states matter, in Chile it's literally 50% of the voters on one side and 50% on the others. It's looking very close. Perhaps a slight advantage to Boric. We're not entirely sure yet. We'll see tomorrow. But the interesting thing is, what is the package of issues on either side of this median voter? And who is this median voter? Well, the median voter is considerably wealthier than the average Chilean, simply because fewer poor people vote. So rather than having, say, an income of 700,000 pesos a month, which would be the median adult income, around 600,000 pounds, that would be, I guess, now a little bit more. We have, instead of that, somebody who's probably, you know, living in a household that might have an income of 1.5 million pesos, you know, which is middle class by world standards, middle class by anyone's standards, be middle class in Britain in the start of the 90s or Australia in the start of the 90s in terms of their purchasing power. So this person is a bit wealthier than the average Chilean. It's interesting to think about how interested they are in the different positions. Cast is obviously law and order, control migration. Boric is kind of generational change, free and easy, lots of nice social policy, the standard sort of social policies sort of stuff, and a little bit of suspicion about his economic bona fides. They seem quite different, actually, don't they? They do seem quite different, not least because Boric will have to pay attention to the Communist Party, which is a big participant in this coalition. And whereas I suppose Cast is not really beholden to anybody on his right. In that sense, he perhaps has more freedom of manoeuvre.
Yes, they trust him, for sure. To his right, they trust him. So, yes, they're quite different figures. We do seem to be at an interesting point in time. I mean, both of these figures seem to have their piety, their paternalism. They'll tell you what the right kind of family is. In the Boric case, all kinds of families. In in the Cass case, a big one like his, with lots of love. Not really that incompatible, those positions, even though some of the details mean a lot to a lot of people. Their demeanors are very important. They have different personalities, but economics are probably more important to this median voter than their personalities.
Yeah, so the question is whether the median voter, one of the questions is whether the median voter thinks that he stands, assuming he's totally self-interested, that whether he stands to benefit most from Cass' self-reliance message, continuing low taxes and free markets, because not many Chileans pay income tax at the moment, and when you do start paying income tax, the starting rate is I think 4%, and that goes up quite some way. So you have to earn quite a bit before you start even paying the next rate, which is I think 13%. But of course, if Boric wants to move up towards first world levels of spending, then people are going to have to start paying income tax. And perhaps that won't even be an issue in the election, simply because people can't imagine paying income tax at the moment. And they think that all the money is going to be paid by a few rich people, and they're going to get an unpleasant surprise.
Well, perhaps the other side of that coin is Boric won't be able to do much with the economic outlook we've got. Cass won't be able to do that much either, but Boric will certainly be very constrained and have an alibi from undertaking any great reforms. So the less he can do, the more reassuring he is, because he can't do that much damage. But no matter how moderate Boric is, international capital will not like his government. International capital will look elsewhere. There's some things that international capital will like to get out of Chile, like copper, for example, and also markets. It's a good place to sell things. But they might look to develop their businesses elsewhere. And also in the upper middle class, well beyond the median voter, perhaps the top 15% or even something smaller, which have something like popular capital as we'd understand it in the developed world, the sort of thing that the median voter has in the developed world. This small group at the top will probably be looking to dollarize their savings. They'll put their savings in dollars, and they'll perhaps be looking to invest outside Chile. That's right, and this has already happened to a great extent, and to the extent that the Chilean peso has fallen to a kind of record low, actually, I think, against the dollar and other currencies. And of course, there's also a great capital shortage because of the withdrawals from the pension funds that were the Chilean government's answer to the economic crisis caused by the pandemic, was to let people withdraw money from their pension funds, from their own pension funds. An amazingly popular policy, considering that it's going to presumably pauperize people when they retire. But everybody loved it, which just shows how little faith they have in the pension promises of their pension funds. And 30% in all, people were allowed to remove first 10, then another 10, then a further 10% of their pension funds, of their savings. A fourth tranche was defeated in Congress. Which Boric backed for the populist appeal of backing it, knowing that it wasn't going to pass. And now he's shut up shop. He's learnt and said, no, we're not going for a fourth, because now he's responsible all of a sudden. So he manages to be both populist and also responsible, but to different people, because different audiences probably heard those messages. That's right. But and so, well, I mean, it shows that in a way, Chileans simply do not believe that the future is going to come. This is clearly a fairly short-termist outlook. And secondly, it's caused a big capital crunch in the country. So that and the withdrawal of foreign capital. So this was
these pension funds were the great source of funding for Chilean firms and the great support of the Chilean stock market. So with so much of that gone, and with foreign investors pulling out because of the uncertainty caused by the elections, there's been a great credit crunch. It's very hard to get a mortgage now. Banks have reduced terms from 25 years to, they don't like lending more than 15 years now. They've stiffened up the conditions a lot. Interest rates have gone up. And in fact, you actually even get interest on your savings now, I discovered. You get 5% a year now on your savings, which is only the inflation rate, but that's a lot better than Western Europe or, you know, the States or Japan,
Yes.
where you're getting zero.
Yes, these are difficult times. Now, Cast, as far as the median voter goes, he may have a lot of quiet median voters who are very worried about the price of petrol, for example, and the different opportunities that there are in the middle of the economy. He'll almost certainly get a bump from the markets and the value of the peso if he wins. I think people pretty much know that. That doesn't mean he can solve all the problems in the country and run the economy well, and expectations are not particularly high for his performance. So perhaps there is a way for Cast to pull ahead. We're not sure. One factor that seems to work against him, as far as we can tell from the social science and polling that's been done, is that Boric seems to have an advantage with women, which is interesting in the sense that Boric offers a sort of lovely, soft, socially oriented aesthetic that I think some women find quite calming. Probably other women are worried about lack of security and things like that. And Boric also seems to have some very high quality allies and endorsements coming from talented female figures. We've mentioned Iskia Sitches, the former head of the medical college, who's now helping run his campaign, a wonderful retail politician, and also Michelle Bachelet, who was more or less discredited by 2017, 2018, when she finished her second term, but has come back as the head of UN Women at the moment. No, it's UN Human Rights. She was UN Women at one point, now she's UN Human Rights, and she's endorsed Boric. Of course, Michelle Bachelet was actually subject to some human rights violations, and of course her father died in the early days after the military coup of 1973. She's got a lot of moral capital in that area. But more even than that, she's what I would call an alpha amiga.
All right, not alpha omega, alpha
No.
amiga, as in the female
Yes.
friend in Spanish. Got it?
And my theory of the alpha amiga is that in the Chilean female sociability, the Chilean sociability being a concept in Chilean historiography, the alpha amiga is a woman with some sort of organizational power or sense of authority who makes the other women feel comfortable. You have to be an amiga, and you do not want to be too conspicuously intelligent. On the right of Chilean politics, we have some very intelligent female politicians, but on the left, I'm sure they're perfectly intelligent, but they often hide it well.
You think it's more important to hide it on the left than on the right?
I think so. I think it's very important to be seen to be a resourceful leader, but not out of as a female politician, but not out of some innate superiority, simply out of some connection with other women, to be an amiga. Amiga is an important concept, I think, in the Chilean sociability.
I see. Got it. Okay, that's interesting. I think on the whole, being associated with the United Nations is a kind of kiss of death, really, isn't it, for a politician? It's like it makes everything like it reduces everything to a kind of bland sort of level that somehow means you don't get any traction. I think it sort of removes you onto a kind of different and sort of slightly meaningless plane.
I think you've got too close to the sun, Neil. Having worked with some international organisations.
Yes, you're right. I'd better be careful what I say, really, haven't I? That's right.
I mean, simply you're too close to the workings, and the illusion has worn off for you. But a lot of people do admire the United Nations in Chile. Strangely enough,
it's true that actually that these kind of concepts that, well, it's like, for example, people in Chile talk about human rights a lot, and they refer things back to human rights, and is this consistent with human rights? Whereas in Britain, you never hear anybody talking about that, or the States, I don't think. Is this not part of the kind of every man's discourse, really? So yes. I guess this stuff, even though, of course, human rights and all the rights of man, whatever, were came to the United Nations from Europe and so on, and from America. So I guess these things perhaps do have more prestige. You know, I guess if you're a poor country, you would like to see a world government because you think you'll get like all the good stuff shared out to you. Whereas if you're a rich country, you don't want to see a world government. So you don't like, because you think you're going to have to, like, you know, a lot of parasites are going to sort of, like, you know, take all your money and stuff. So you're not so keen on the United Nations. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, if you go back to the foundation of the United Nations in 1948, the Charter, clearly it was aimed by the winners of World War II towards the contestable parts of the world. Clearly, mostly aimed towards Africa, most of Asia, and Latin America. Obviously, in this case, with the aid of the Catholic Church and the United States, as a way of stabilizing things. And human rights are sacred. This is something you can't cross. Of course, the CIA then went about violating human rights at its pleasure, but it was certainly to be promoted as the civilized way to do things. And I think it's been so naturalized in places like Chile that human rights are automatically good. It's highly controversial to talk about a human rights industry. CAST certainly has hinted in that direction. It's a very, very sensitive issue for people, simply because it's how the population and perhaps the median voter has been managed by the media and government and international spin for the last 70 years or so.
That's right. Even though when it comes down to any specific point, like, for example, a border dispute, then you're immediately back in kind of 16th century Europe, really, as far as attitudes go, and human rights go out the window, really. And it's like, that's our land, and sort of nobody really cares very much about human rights. But at the level of discourse, it's very important, yeah, and you're wise not to cross it.
Yeah. Well, nationalism is very important. Nationalism plus human rights. That was sort of the recipe for the US defense during the Cold War in Latin America.
And we must well remember, while we're at it on the subject, that, you know, Latin Americans are kind of innocently and openly nationalistic in a way that would just be impossible now, say, somewhere like Britain, you know.
Yes.
Despite,
well, they're such centralized states. And even in Chile, decentralization is a big issue. Obviously, Chile is a very long country with all of these regions that are stacked on top of one another. Decentralization intuitively makes a lot of sense. But so does centralization when you're so stretched out in that case. And the funny thing about the decentralization discourse is it's very, very centralist. It seems to be motivated with spreading Chilenidad, Chileanness, far and wide, with some variations in different places.
Okay, well, anyway, we're now getting quite far away from our topic, which was the election. I think possibly irretrievably so. So I guess on that note, we should probably wrap this up. And obviously, we're just, we basically don't have a clue what's going to happen tomorrow. It's very exciting.
It's very, very exciting.
A quite
Very
equal
exciting.
election. And we'll be talking about it, of course, when it's all happened, and making predictions with much greater authority when we know what actually.
It's all going to make sense. It will all make perfect sense when we see what happens.
Exactly.
But I have no idea what will happen tomorrow.
Right. That's it. Okay. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you.